welcome to Dialogue. Leaders from China and the European Union have just concluded the China-EU summit in Beijing, focusing on strengthening bilateral cooperation while addressing areas of disagreement. Both sides reaffirmed their partnership and agreed to deepen collaboration on climate change, underscoring their shared commitment to global stability. So how important is the China-EU relationship for both sides and also the world? What divides still remain, and how might this relationship evolve in the years ahead? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Wang Huiyao, founder of the Center for China and Globalization and a former counselor of China State Council, Dr. Jan Oberg, director of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, and Anthony Chan, former JPMorgan Chase chief economist. Welcome to Dialogue. So Jan, I will start with you. Give us some background of the China-EU relationship. We know that there's a global let's say, rising uncertainty amid geopolitical competition, of course, and a tech competition, and also trade frictions, conflicts, wars there. How do you look at this, the EU? How are they managing the challenges they are facing, in particular relationship with Washington and Beijing?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. I think the first thing that strikes me when I listened to some of the conversation yesterday was to which extent do these two partners as different civilizations and cultures actually at a deeper level understand each other? China has a way of thinking that is different from Europe. And I don't know whether that has ever been studied in international politics. How do we understand? When somebody says fairness, what does that mean? If somebody says working together for peace, what does that mean in the eyes and ears and civilization of those who speak and hear it on the other side? And I think there were clear examples yesterday of two very different approaches to the future. Secondly, I think what Madame von der Leyen called the inflection point is much more serious, because the real thing that has happened the last 25 years is that if you take the year 2000, the European Union was the biggest trade partner with virtually everybody except China in the world. Now it's the other way around, that China is the biggest trading partner with basically everybody except the U.S. and a couple of other countries. So that has changed hugely. And I think that what struck me was, if you want harmony, if you want cooperation, if you want a long-range vision, you've got to start there and back it down to trade issues. But there's no time for things like that. When people meet, they exchange niceties and congratulate, by the way, the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations, etc. But I would love to have meetings where everything was much more informal and where you could explore what do you mean by the words you use and then get to a kind of common understanding. I don't think there was any achievement of particularly much common understanding yesterday. And finally, I was shocked by the fact that Madame von der Leyen and Mr. Costa, and I suppose Kallas too, the European EU representatives, made it conditional for future cooperation that China will get engaged and put pressure on Russia. Now, that comes from a European leadership that has done nothing but provoke the conflict by NATO expansion. When you talk with EU, you talk with NATO too. Secondly, with an EU that has cancelled all diplomatic relations for all practical purposes or contacts with Russia, and who pumps in weapons and decides that Ukraine is going to win over Russia. They still have not understood what is going on. At that level, you make it conditional on future cooperation with China, that China must put pressure on Russia. Why don't they do that themselves if they are diplomats? What they are forgetting is that China has already published a very interesting framework discussion paper for peace in Ukraine. I don't understand why that is. If you want to have good relations with China, you don't put that into a condition.
Well, that seems a bit contradictory, let's say. But
I think it is.
yeah, Anthony, As Ian earlier mentioned, of course, the two sides, they did in their statement reaffirmed the importance of keeping stable bilateral relations and promote each other as quote unquote partners in official statements, despite, of course, the differences between the two sides in terms of trade in particular. So how do you look at this or interpret this reaffirmed commitment to being partners, against the backdrop, of course, as we mentioned, about persistent strategic uncertainty or this tension around the world?
Well, I think that at this point, we live in a multipolar global landscape. And so I think it's important for both sides, both Europe and China, to cooperate with each other, or as President Xi has said, to find common ground. I think that being pragmatic in this situation is crucial. And I think that eventually both sides will realize that that is important. Yes, there are issues where both countries or both regions will disagree. But at the end of the day, the benefits from agreement are much greater than disagreements from differences in their points of view. I think that we are living in a world where these sort of alliances are going to be more and more important as other countries, namely the United States, come between both China and Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anthony, of course, if you look at the two representatives from the European Union, Wendland and Koska, both of them said that their meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, they use the words excellent. At the same time, the official statement, they say they don't want to decouple from China. So obviously, we are looking ahead. We can say the relationship is supposed to be stable. It's supposed to be, let's say, there's a continuation of probably more trade, and of course, there will be more challenges too, because you trade more, yes, you tend to have more problems there.
Yes, there are issues and problems because remember that both people, all the diplomats in Europe know that they have to walk a very fine line, or some might argue a tightrope, because they want to make sure that they are doing everything they can to promote a trade agreement with the United States, and at the same time understand that they want to also have good relations or stable relations with China. So it's a very delicate balance for them. But I hope that these diplomats will be smart enough, pragmatic enough to make that a reality, because these alliances or friendships or stability are absolutely essential moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, Huiyao, welcome to the show. As we mentioned, both European leaders described their meeting with the Chinese president, the sides, as excellent. They say they don't want to decouple from China. And, the remarks from Chinese President Xi Jinping, he said, China and Europe are big guys in the international community who must strengthen communication, enhance mutual trust, and deepen cooperation at a time of intertwined changes. Basically, he said that the challenges facing Europe at the present do not come from China. So, what's your comment? How do you look at the summit here?
Yes, thank you, Chindo. I think this summit is quite timely and is overdue, and also that this summit, basically after Foreign Minister Wang Yi visit to Brussels, Berlin, and Paris, this is really well expected summit. I think the attitudes and of course atmosphere is getting better. Because, as both leaders said, there's such an importance. And also, this is going to reflect the global situation. We are living in an uncertain world now. We are still facing trade war, tariff war. We are facing, conflict in Ukraine. And we are facing Gaza and all the many things. The world economy is also in bad shape of the risk. So in that sense, China and the EU has no really any fundamental problem. Let's say like that. We are not have a border issue. We don't have a big geopolitical issue. But of course, we have some differences in governing style, in managing the economy. But that can be really talked through the friendly discussion and not really treat each other as rivalry. So, but I think this time, the leaders of European countries realize that now and starting to get more positive. That's important. We need a new narrative for China-EU relations. Now on the three so-called 3 points that has been generating the last 4 or 5 years during the COVID, during the peak of the Russia-Ukraine war. We need new narratives. So now new narratives, of course, we need a cooperation, we need a partnership, we need looking forward, and also the multilateral world needs China and EU to safeguard. The WHO, WTO, climate change. Also positions on the global peace and stability, many things. So I think there's a lot of it. Also, furthermore, China can do more business in the EU, can invest more. There's such a big EU business in China. We could do many more things. If we have a positive attitude of both, particularly from EU leaders.
Yeah. You mentioned the climate change. You mentioned saying we could do a lot more. China and the EU. Exactly. For example, one example is the joint efforts on climate change. There's a joint statement. The both sides basically pledged to work together on global issues, including tackling climate change and preserving biodiversity. They called for the world's biggest economists to work harder to mitigate the threats posed by an overheating planet. And we are experiencing here in China the overheating planet, and also in some of the European places. So climate change is a real threat. Somehow, over the past years, countries are prioritizing security. All kinds of security is like at the expense of climate change, and we have to focus on, the real threat to humanity, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think the climate change is the utmost importance for the mankind. And then, for example, we had the industrial revolution of steam engine. We had the electric revolution of a computer and the digital. Now it's the time we have a green power revolution going on. And then that's where EU and China has huge potential to collaborate. For example, China can help Africa have those solar farms. And let's have a high transmission line and send that power to Europe. There's so many things we can work together. China and France used to sign a collaboration working in the third countries. We could do that, and also the EVs. The EV manufacturers from European countries are having big market in China, and also they are developing the state-of-art technology while they have upstream, downstream here. So we can all work together, invest back into Europe, invest back to to other countries of the world. So there's enormous potential for us to work together. And the thing is, we need a positive narrative and positive attitudes, rather than we always using the cliche to blame each other. So that's not really the way to go. I think we have to find a new start and find a new, 50 years is a landmark. With next half century, we should really aim at collaboration. Of course, we have Olympic-style competition, but not rivalry. We're not rivalry. That has to be really make sure. We can help China, can help EU to mediate, Russian-Ukraine war. And EU can help China mediate China-U.S. war. We have, trade war. We can do a lot of things in common, and we have so much in complementary.
Yeah, changing the narrative from, systematic rivals. Thank you, Huiyao. From the rivals, from competitor to like more focusing on partner. Probably that's also important there. Anthony, the decades-old Paris Agreement. Both sides endorsed this, Paris Agreement. We know that Washington started again withdrawal process from the agreement in January. So I think probably that gives this China and the EU cooperation probably extra importance in terms of shouldering the responsibility to fight climate change here.
I think that's true. We know that that's an important first step for Europe and China to be aligned with each other. We also know that they also agreed for full cooperation at the COP30 meetings on climate change in Brazil. And we also know that it is not only an important step for both of these countries to do it, but it's setting the ground for the next administration in the United States. I'm confident that the next administration will, in fact, embrace climate change again. And so all the work that China and Europe are doing now are just preparation for the next administration, which I am confident will be a lot friendlier towards climate change.
Now we are joined by Professor Liu Baocheng, and our old friend from the University of International Business and Economics. Baocheng, obviously climate change, I guess, the agreement between the two sides is so important that it draws attention of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who issued a statement welcoming the commitment from China and the EU, saying that obviously right now the two economies, the two largest economies, paying close attention to climate change. Why is it particularly important for China and the EU to work together on climate change?
Well, I think Europe was the one that has been playing a leadership position in proposing climate change, and then China has very much endorsed that. We still remember during the Hangzhou APEC when Chinese president signed the deal with Obama all together to commit to the Paris Agreement, and then Donald Trump totally withdraw from that. So, the three biggest economies now, there are only two who are really upholding such a position. It shows that we do have the shared value over how to protect the Mother Earth, and more importantly, the United Nations has the Sustainable Development Goal, and where climate change even play a longer impact beyond the Sustainable Development Goal. So, and also that they play a very important role in that, because China is the largest global manufacturer in the world, and we do face both domestically and internationally such a sort of pressure to first to keep our growth momentum on the economic side, on the industry side, but we still need to exert the utmost effort to bring the environmental quality for its own people and for the world. So this shared vision is there to bring China and Europe together. And now we are facing a number of challenges at the moment. One is that the economy is now on the whole world is now having a sort of pressure to really to have a decline type of trend. And now China is also bringing the high quality growth rate on the top agenda. So how to transform one is that from the energy intensity now into a service and also the zero carbon type of operation. So that's very much in the challenge. And now China also needs to work with Europe to, it's not really a reciprocal trade, but rather a common solution to deal with structural changes and to bring the economy also on a stable growth. And on the other hand, we do really have a number of technology projects that are already been working from research into real operation. So this is really a good reason and also good ground for us to really to move together hand in hand.
Now turning to China-U.S. trade, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng is set to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Sweden for key economic and trade talks. The meeting is a follow-up to the 90-minute phone call in early June between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump, which reportedly reached a trade consensus and paved the way for officials to resume negotiations under the trade consultation mechanism. So what are the key priorities this time, and what are the challenges for the new rounds of negotiation? Yan, obviously the world attention is on the big economies, big players now, over the weekend and beginning of next week, that will be on the U.S. and China. So tell us, what's your understanding of what does Washington want from its trading partners, including China here?
I'm not an economist, and I'm also not an expert in
But
trade, but
strategically,
I can see that this comes at a very interesting point because Europe is waiting for what Trump wants to push through in terms of tariffs, which could be devastating. And there are rumors that this time Europe is going to speak back and not be pushed around on this issue, whereas Europe is totally pushed around when it comes to security issues. The other thing is that I'm glad to see that Sweden is a host, because Sweden has changed completely from a neutral country that used to do mediation and to be a free place to meet and to intervene as mediator. And that the two parties are meeting here. That is, for me, a nice thing with a completely NATO integrated Sweden. Third, I think that Europe may find itself rather soon in a situation when it will have to relax a bit when it comes to telling China what to do, because the relationship between Europe and the United States could be so unattractive for Europe that it will have to turn somewhere else. Now, having said that, I'm sometimes wondering, how would Europe feel if China talked constantly about delinking or de-risking or whatever? That is already signaling lack of trust. Secondly, how attractive is Europe from a point of view of China? Let me give you a little rundown of the problems I see. I think it's in a Cold War, both with Russia and the US. I think it has placed itself there. It didn't have to be there, but it has started a war as NATO countries with Russia, which it should never have done. Third, you might say that if we are concerned about climate change, how much money will there be left in the West for doing something serious about that? If you notice the incredible increase in investments in militarism, warfare, weapons, arms factories, and God knows what, it has become an obsession in Europe. You know, you do not only have the rearmament project of 100 billion euros, you also now have 5% for
5%
military industry, which has
spending,
nothing
yes.
to do with security.
Right.
Because you don't tie security to a percentage of your gross national product. You tie it to a serious analysis of what threatens your country in the next 20 to 40 years. Otherwise, you're an amateur and a fool.
Yeah,
and that's what Europe is on these points. So my point is, I don't know what will come out of these negotiations in Stockholm today, but I think we're in a very interesting triangular, very unpredictable triangular relationship when it comes to US, Europe, and China. And I think the West has a problem with still a kind of colonial mentality that we can tell others what to do. We should listen much more to where our place will be in the future, because it will be, as has been said before, a very multi-nodal and multipolar in which we need to have unity and diversity and not try to make others
That's definitely
follow our commands.
a changing world, evolving situation. Anthony, so what are the priorities of Washington for this new round of negotiation?
Well, I think these new round of negotiations will certainly make it very clear to the world that the United States understands the importance of trade with China. And I say that in the context of the rare earth metals, which the United States initially felt was not that important. But given the fact that they use these rare earth metals as inputs into the automobile industry, other related industries, and even the military, it has become front and center. And China, of course, realizes that. And it's no coincidence in my mind that because of that importance, the United States is already relaxing some of the technology restrictions that they had. So as we enter these new negotiations, it is with the understanding of the importance of trade with China, especially with regard to some of the imports that we have. So I think that in these new negotiations, it's going to be characterized by more respect and a better understanding of the importance of cooperation between the United States and China.
Baocheng, what's your expectation? As Anthony said, yes, there's a less sort of relaxation of restrictions of technology. And NVIDIA H20 chips now available in China market, and of course, are we looking at first of all extension of the deadline August 12th? And also probably some kinds of deal like what we used to have a phase 1 deal like in 2018.
I think now when the two biggest economies sit together with their highest representatives, there is something that China can argue that that's not only dealing with a sort of a bilateral trade relationship, but represent many parts of the world to question, whether the national economic emergency is really justifiable in the first place. That is there to support such sort of reciprocal tariff or Liberation Day. Two is that the interdependence of the two biggest economies, and with the high level of complexity, so that's not something that the tariff can really address. Third is that the 20% slap on China based on the fentanyl issue is totally groundless. So through my study and research, China has been highly cooperative in that regard. It is really the last mile, the traffic control by the United States. That's something that they need to do a better job rather than blame on China. So these are really the ground that's supposedly to sustain the U.S. tariff, but this is totally not there. On the other hand, we see some of the legacies that is still there during the Trump's first administration over the 301, over the 232. And this is something that we can really negotiate on case-by-case basis, but the blanket type of tariff is not really acceptable, and it is not really legitimate. So that's why that's where we need to build our argument and bring back some of the trajectories that we do enjoy and benefit each other. So this type of relax three companies for information or for the technology control by relaxing rare earths for half a year. So that's not the way that we deal with to find a more sustainable solution.
So Anthony, can we say, whatever happened to happen, I mean, the two economies will continue to get intertwined, continue to be interdependent on each other, or continue to trade?
There is no question in my mind that both economies, China and the United States, will continue to trade with each other and will remain intertwined. Yes, there may have been an effort to de-risk, as you mentioned before, but I think the realities are setting in that those goals were unrealistic and, in fact, counterproductive. So I believe that moving forward, there will be greater cooperation. And the evidence of that is that going into these negotiations, the United States is talking about negotiating for an extension of a deadline. Mm-hmm. The reality is that they've already decided that they have to relax that deadline. It's not a negotiation. It is something that's going to happen. And it's going to happen because they realize the importance of trade with the United States. Now, are we on a sustainable path? Probably not yet. Are we going to move towards a sustainable path? That's questionable. But for the moment, we realize that trade is important. And remember that for all the criticisms of this administration is not going to last forever. And China always plays the long game. Mm-hmm. So as long as we can continue in sort of a trade path for a while, we're going to do okay.
Right. On that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.